One's ready. Go!
Hey everybody, today's Daily Drop is brought to you by Barbell Apparel. BarbellApparel.com, $99 jeans right now. This is the last week for the sale. They also have a lifetime guarantee, so that if you have any manufacturing defects or you rip them or you tear them or any kind of way, which I highly doubt you're going to do because I use these things. I use their chinos and their jeans for hiking. Believe it or not, jeans are typically not great for hiking, but their chinos, fantastic. They also have a tactical pant that you can grab as well as shorts. So any kind of your fitness needs, very stretchy, lifetime guarantee. Like I said, um, with that lifetime guarantee, you can send it back. All you got to do is pay for shipping and handling. Barbell will take care of it. Barbell Apparel will take care of it. If not, if you're one of their elite members where you pay a small fee every single month, that kind of helps build credit so that you can save it up and then buy something at the end. If you're one of those members, then it's free shipping and handling for you with any kind of issues. One of the also great things that they have on it is that if you need to get it tailored and you buy, say, 34 by 34s, they will actually give you a $20 voucher to pay for the tailoring for it. So barbellapparel.com, we don't have a promo code with them. Just on your exit survey from your purchase, hit One's Ready, let them know that we sent you. And if not, then hit other and then write us in. That way they know that we sent you. All right, on to the news. This is 6 March, and we're going to start with joint news after I take a sip of water that has CardoMax in it. Brother. All right. Some of the joint news. Number 1, Trump reveals a top terrorist behind Abbey attack apprehended, facing swift sword of American justice. Fox News released on 4 March 2025. President Trump said Tuesday that the top suspect in the Abbey attack at Kabul International Airport in 2021 has been apprehended. Mohammed Sharifullah is on his way to the United States to face swift sword of American justice, Trump said during a speech during a joint session of Congress. Trump thanked Pakistan for helping apprehend Sharifullah. The Abbey bombing killed 13 American service members and injured over 170 Afghan civilians. If that is in fact him and the one that was involved, good. Number 2, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said U.S. is prepared. Oh, going back to the number 1, glad we got him if that is in fact him. Now, where are the Epstein files? Where are they? Looking at you, Pam Bondi. Looking at you, Kash Patel. Number 2, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says U.S. is prepared to go to war with China over tariff threats. New York Post, 5 March 2025. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said Wednesday the United States is prepared for Chinese aggression in response to a provocative statement by Chinese officials on Tuesday. Chinese Foreign Minister spokesperson Lin Yang, I'm probably saying that wrong, but said that if the United States wants war, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, then China is ready to fight. Hegseth, during an appearance on Fox and Friends, said, quote, "Those who long for peace must prepare for war. That's why we're rebuilding our military. That's why we're reestablishing deterrence in the warrior ethos. If we want to deter war with the Chinese or others, we have to be strong." 100%. That is absolutely the truth. We don't want an engagement with China at all. And I promise you, China does not want an engagement with us either. But in order to the world is a better and safer place when America is strong, and we do that through military strength. We do it through DIME. Oh man, of course I'm gonna bring up DIME, and I forget the freaking the acronym. It's the diplomacy. DIME diplomacy. It's man, of course. Diplomacy, information, military, and economic. Those are the 4 ways that we influence other countries to do it. I'll remember that acronym eventually. I know what it means. It's one of those things where you have the acronym and you know what it means, but then when you have to actually say what the words are or what the letters are, forget it. Number 3, firings begin at the Pentagon. Veterans, civil servants caught in the crosshairs. Military.com, 5 March 2025. Over 100 civilian employees at the Defense Health Agency, the Defense Logistics Agency, and the Navy, and the Uniformed Services University of Health Sciences have been dismissed as part of the Trump administration's program to downsize the federal government. The Defense Department announced plans to dismiss 5,400 probationary employees on February 21st in an effort to cut its workforce by up to 8%. Darren Selnick, acting Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, on Monday directed the firings of non-mission critical employees. The firings took place despite... Golly, man. This cough is crazy. I just can't shake it. Doesn't help when I'm sitting here talking either. But the firings took place despite a U.S. District Court judge's ruling February 28th that the dismissals originally ordered by the president originally ordered by the Office of Personnel Management were likely unlawful. OPM revised its termination guide on Tuesday to clarify that it is not directing the agencies to take specific performance-based actions. Nothing to add on that. Like I said in yesterday's, a lot of lives impacted by that. So it's not ideal, but there's definitely a lot of fat that needs to be trimmed from the DoD. And many just like active duty. So I want to be clear, there are plenty of active duty, especially some lieutenant colonels, and E9s or chiefs that are roadblocks. So there are a lot of civilians that are roadblocks as well. Because, I didn't need it whenever I was active duty, or I didn't need it. Other guys didn't need it. So why do you need it? So that kind of thing. And I can go in depth on that if you guys ever want to know. But number 4, docs reveal damaging discrimination in National Guard, even as woke military under attack. USA Today, 4 March 2025. National Guard documents obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests and lawsuits show several cases of employment discrimination within the ranks. With 35 discrimination complaints spanning 2015 to 2022, the cases include a black guardsman who was forced to wear a large chain for allegedly leaving a training event early, a black soldier whose superiors referred to him as... Okay. I'm just reading this, to be clear. I'm just reading this. A black soldier whose superiors referred to him as a coon, and a gay soldier in Idaho whose commander called gay marriage immoral. About 50% of the claims were substantiated, according to the documents. National Guard Bureau officials declined to comment, citing ongoing litigation. Based off of this, obviously, there's not much detail, but that is horrific and should have never happened. I was smiling at the beginning of it because I'm sitting here thinking of, people call it hazing now, or and you're not allowed to do it, but thinking about some of the funny things and ridiculous things that we were made to do whenever we were getting extra treatment or corrective measures or revectoring or whatever kind of corrective behavior you want to talk, or corrective measures you want to talk about to correct behavior. We would do silly things like that just to humiliate and punish people. Not humiliate, but shame them. Like, you know what I mean? So that's why I was smiling at the first part of that. But then when you start reading the rest of it, you're like, oh shit, this is something completely different. So that's terrible. All right. This is Air Force news. Number 5, AMC finishing up analysis for the next generation tanker, Air and Space Forces, 5 March 2025. Air Mobility Command has nearly finished its analysis of alternatives for the next generation air refueling system. AMC Commander General John LaMontagne said during the Air and Space Forces Association Warfare Symposium in Aurora, Colorado on Wednesday. The analysis focuses on runway requirements, how much fuel the aircraft can deliver, and radar signature management, LaMontagne said. The Air Force's current tanker fleet is over 60 years old, he said, adding, the 135 has served us well, but it is time to recapitalize that fleet going forward. General Randall Reed, commander of the U.S. Transportation Command, also advocated for KC-135 recapitalization during testimony to the Senate Armed Service Committee on Wednesday. Yeah, man, those F-35s, those KC-135s are old, super capable plane, really fast. They can fly 0.9 Mach. Believe it or not, like because their wings are swept back so far and they've got 4 engines, like very, very fast aircraft, especially for a big tanker like that. Number 6. Warheads on foreheads. Top leaders for Air Force, Space Force leaning into Defense Secretary's rhetoric. Military.com, 5 March 2025. Air Force Chief of Staff General David Alvin and Chief of Space Operations General Chance Saltzman have embraced the warfighter ethos established by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Alvin, in his keynote speech at the Air and Space Forces Association Warfare Symposium on Monday, said, "We have to sustain and maintain the ability to go anytime, anywhere at the dense." No, I don't know. I do not write these, right? I'm reading them verbatim, and oftentimes rather, they have grammar and spell check errors. But anywhere in the densest threat environment, maybe, and put warheads on foreheads anywhere the president might want. Saltzman told Guardians during his keynote that they were warfighters who must be prepared to establish space superiority during any conflict. Quote, that's what it means to live and work in the greatest military the world has ever seen, Saltzman said. To be warfighters regardless of the uniform we wear or the job we hold. Defense official speaking on background said the focus on readiness and lethality are at the core of the Air Force's efforts to realign to the Trump administration's priorities and the threat environment. Number 7, deportation flights using military aircraft expected to continue despite pause, General says. Stars and Stripes, 5 March 2025. The commander of the U.S. Transportation Command said Wednesday he expects to continue the use of military aircraft for deportation flights. Testifying before the Senate Armed Service Committee, General Randall Reed said, quote, if I get the task, I'll absolutely fly it, Reed said. Reed said he would notify the Senate Armed Service Committee if Transcom is tasked to conduct more deportation flights. Democrats in Congress have raised concerns about the cost of using C-17 Globemaster IIIs and C-130 Hercules aircraft to conduct deportation flights, in contrast to civilian aircraft, which usually cost about 30% of a C-17. Number 8. Number 8. F for fighter. Air Force combat drones get novel mission designation, Defense News, 5 March 2025. The Air Force's first collaborative combat aircraft are set to fly this summer, Chief of Staff General David Alvin said during his AFA Warfare Symposium keynote speech on Monday. Quote, for the first time in our history, we have a fighter designation in the YQF-42 Alpha and the YQF-44 Alpha, Alvin said, referring to CCA drones made by General Atomics and Anduril Industries. Quote, it may just be symbolic, but we are telling the world. Okay. It may just be symbolic, but we are telling the world we are leaning into a new chapter of aerial warfare, Alvin said. The Air Force is embracing and leaning into human-machine teaming and autonomous fighter technology. We know that's got to be part of the future, he said. Number 9. How flying test bed work has helped B-21 make good progress. Air and Space Forces, 5 March 2025. The B-21 Raider has needed few software adjustments during its flight testing. The president of Northrop Grumman's Aeronautics Division said Wednesday at the Air and Space Forces Association Warfare Symposium in Aurora, Colorado. Tom Jones said he's very pleased with the test results and the rhythm of B-21 testing. adding that the Raider flies test sorties at least twice a week out of Edwards Air Force Base, California. Air Force and contractor personnel are maintaining the bomber, and engineers are receiving real-time feedback from the B-21, June said. Dude, that B-21 is going to be badass when it's finally done. Like, I mean, just the capability of that thing is going to be unreal. Unfreaking real. Let's see. Number 10. Air Force General Services. Air Force General says services newest plane could be used over the U.S.-Mexico border. Task and purpose, 5 March 2025. The OA-1K Skyraider 2 could be used for U.S. Northern Command operations to secure the southern border. That makes, yeah, okay. That does make sense, actually, because Northern Command controls not just the northern border, but also the southern border. Let me read that again, because it threw me off there with the whole northern and southern thing, and I also have people texting me, and it's ridiculous. So, U.S. Northern Command operations to secure the southern border. Air Force Special Operations Command Director of Strategic Plans said on February 27th, quote, providing scalable and precision effects is where the Skyraider 2 will come in. Brigadier General Craig Prather said in a release. The Skyraider 2 could take on missions from the southwest border to Africa and create dilemmas to those who are in competition with. The Skyraider 2 is a multi-mission capable AFSOC. The Skyraider 2 is multi-mission capable. AFSOC spokesperson Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Hayes said, making it a viable option for special operations activities in any theater. A spokesperson for Northcom declined to comment on how the command might employ the Skyraider 2 for border defense, citing operational security. The Skyraider 2 is designed to conduct short takeoffs and landings and to operate from unimprovised and austere airfields. Its name honors the A-1 Skyraider, which flew from 1946 to the 1980s and saw combat in the Korean and Vietnam Wars. Number 11. I'm looking forward to that thing, actually. Let me go back to that Skyraider. I'm looking forward to that thing. However, if you guys paid attention the other day, I definitely have some criticisms of how that thing was procured and how long it took and what it's actually going to be capable of, especially in the summer. I don't know. It all depends on when it's. I'm excited about it, but at the same time, I'm also very, very skeptical. But anyway, number 11, Trump's orders curbing government spending, dwindling attendance at the Air Force Conference, military.com, 5 March 2025. Attendance at the AFA Warfare Symposium has dropped, with far fewer airmen and guardians in attendance than in previous years, due in part to President Donald Trump's executive order to curb government spending. The Air and Space Forces Association communications director said Wednesday, we're still excited to be offering professional development opportunities, but obviously if you're looking around the hall, you will notice significantly less bodies, Amy Hudson said. An Air Force official speaking on background said that the Department of the Air Force limited attendance to comply with the spirit of Trump's executive order. Attendance is limited to those with a direct role in the conference, senior leaders with previously scheduled engagements, and local participants, the official said. Acting Undersecretary of the Air Force Edwin Oshiba issued a memo on Sunday limiting the Department of the Air Force travel to only mission essential purposes. So this AFA in Colorado is much, much smaller, even normally much, much smaller than the big one in September that happens in DC. I'm interested to see in September what it's going to look like for that one, because that one is, it's incredibly big, and you see some of these displays that Northrop Grumman have, Raytheon, Boeing, and millions of dollars goes into their displays and their booths. It's wild. So we'll see if that kind of continues. But number 12, Colonel Tim Monroe outlines Grand Forks Air Force Base operations in his final State of the Base address. Grand Forks Herald, 5 March 2025. The 319th Reconnaissance Wing will start flying missions directly from Grand Forks Air Force Base, North Dakota this week. The wing's commander said Wednesday. Speaking during his final State of the Base address, Colonel Tim Monroe said the wing will soon execute Secretary of Defense directed missions supporting combatant commands from Grand Forks Air Force Base. B-1B Lancers, temporarily stationed at Grand Forks, while the runways at Ellsworth Air Force Base, South Dakota, undergo renovations, may also conduct operational missions, Monroe said. The Space Development Agency's Guardians at the Grand Forks will also take command of a new tranche of proliferated warfighter space architecture satellites, Monroe said. He said Colonel Alfred Rosales, currently Deputy Commander of the 49th Wing at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, will assume command of the 319th this summer. Right on. All right, this one's Space Force news. Number 13, Space Force hopes it gains from Hegseth's budget shift. Defense One, 5 March 2025. The Space Force is woefully underfunded in protect and defend systems and hopes to receive some of the $50 billion that the Defense Department will redistribute to meet President Donald Trump's priorities. Vice Chief of Space Operations General Michael Guillotine is what I'll call it. It's not guillotine, but it's really close. Said during the Reagan Institute's National Security Innovation Base Summit on Wednesday. The Space Force will evaluate and triage its systems to make sure that it's delivering the most effective and optimal programs to warfighters, Guillotine said. We are trying to look at every requirement we possibly can to shift away from building it internally to buying it externally, he said. Space Force program managers and acquisition experts are looking for ways to offload requirements into existing capabilities, either through commercial partners or allied nations, Guillotine said. Okay, cool. Number 14, Space Force to stand up Guardian Recruiting Squadron with mandate for new mindset, Air and Space Forces, 5 March 2025. The Space Force will establish a Guardian Recruiting Squadron later this year. Chief Master Sergeant of the Space Force, John Benavita. Yeah, that is not what it is either. Man, these names. I am an idiot. Said during an interview at the Air and Space Forces Association Warfare Symposium on Wednesday, quote, the Air Force has been a phenomenal partner with the Space Force in doing the recruiting for us. Well, we're the Department of the Air Force is what you fall under, so yeah, of course we're doing that. We didn't have the infrastructure when we stood up, but all that to be said, we recognize that this is a service responsibility. This is a service obligation to attract and recruit its own. Space Force recruiters have previously been spread out around the country, said Brigadier General Christopher Amarine, commander of the Air Force Recruiting Service. A dedicated unit would allow Guardians to stay in contact with troops more directly, Amarine said. Yeah, I mean, to be fair to you guys, though, to the Space Force, it takes time. You couldn't just bring people into the Space Force and then now make them recruiters, because what are they going to do to even translate what the Space Force does? So it kind of makes sense that allow you guys to get established. It's been 6 years now, I think, is when you guys got established. So like now's a good time. That's right on. I'm here for it. Let us know how we can help. Number 15, Space Force takes new approach to ground control systems, Air and Space Forces, 5 March 2025. The Space Force is modernizing its approach to ground control systems to try and overcome challenges that have held up previous ground system projects. Space Systems Command leaders at the AFA Warfare Symposium on Wednesday, Colonel Robert Davis, Program Executive Office for SSC, which is Space Systems Command, Space Sensing Directorate, said he considers ground segments more important than space components. Quote, grounds has often been an afterthought, Davis said. A lot of the resources and attention has been put to the space segment for good reason, but we have to focus on the ground at least as much, if not more. The Space Force has struggled to bring several ground systems online, particularly the Next Generation Operational Control System for GPS and the Atlas program for commanding and controlling its space domain awareness assets. Number 16, extremely lean Space Force acquisition units brace for Trump's workforce cuts. Defense One, 5 March 2025. Ooh, need a drink. On a serious note, though, if you guys haven't tried this black cherry, wow, it is phenomenal. Oh, it's so good. That's black cherry from CardoMax. Whoa, that's what I got in there. All right. The Space Rapid Capabilities Office will lose some of its civilian workforce as part of the Trump administration's cuts to federal workforce, Space RCO officials said Wednesday. Acquisition teams with the office are already extremely lean, so losing any employees will make it very challenging to execute missions, Space RCO Director Kelly Hammett said. Hammett said the office is losing some employees to the Office of Personnel Management's deferred resignation offer, while others are pursuing opportunities elsewhere. Space Systems Command also had a considerable number of employees apply for the deferred resignation. SSC Commander Lieutenant General Philip Garrett said Monday. Garrett said SSC plans to shift those employees' work elsewhere in the command. If you guys aren't tracking the deferred resignation, that was essentially what is kind of being called the fork in the road. If you are a government employee and this was that, I think it was 6 February was the deadline. If you were a government employee on the civilian sector, you could go, hey, I want to take the deferred resignation. Then basically you get paid no matter what up until I think 30 September of 2025. And then you're now unemployed. Or you could not take it and you could wait and then see if your position ends up getting cut, which is probably unlikely. But a lot of people took the deferred resignation because they're like, well, I essentially get to get paid a guaranteed paycheck until September, and I don't actually have to work anymore. The problem with that is that the chances of that position being removed completely for cuts because is high. And the reason why is because somebody like Doge goes, okay, well, we have this person, took the deferred resignation. Obviously, that position isn't needed, is what the kind of bean counters think. So we'll just remove that billet completely. That's the problem. So it's not a great thing. But anyway, that's where we're at. Number 17, Secret Space Force payloads monitor China's satellite service network, officials say. Breaking news or breaking defense, 5 March 2025. The Space Force has for years operated an orbital payload that can gather information on Chinese sensors. Space Rapid Capabilities Office Director Kelly Hammett said at the AFA Warfare Symposium on Wednesday. Hammett says situational awareness and warning payloads in the orbit have been collecting all kinds of very interesting data on China's space observations, surveillance, and identification systems. There are sensors that can tell whether you're being observed, tracked, targeted, those kinds of things, Hammett said. And that's a capability that we're trying to drive into a larger Space Force. We've done the prototypes and it's working. The payloads could allow more American satellites to determine when they're being tracked, Hammett said. I just want to provide a disclosure to this because that sounds very sensitive. This is all open source right now, and this is being put out over unclassified networks, and this news that I'm reading is getting sent over unclassed networks to all commanders and chiefs. So it's not like I'm breaking the news, I'm just regurgitating what is fed to me. Of interest, U.S. Embassy in Somalia issues urgent warning of potential imminent terror attacks. ABC News, 5 March 2025. The U.S. Embassy in Somalia issued a warning Wednesday of potential imminent terrorist attacks against multiple locations in the country, including Adnad International Airport in Mogadishu. The State Department maintains a do not travel advisory for Somalia due to terrorism, crime, and civil unrest. U.S. officials said embassy officials warned that terrorists may conduct attacks with little or no warning, targeting ports of entry, government buildings, and tourist areas. Why are you going to Somalia as a tourist? Like, dude, that place is a real shithole. One. Two is it's a very, very dangerous place. I mean, like, extremely dangerous. Almost in the way that if you decide to travel there, like, dude, you just may be on your own. Like, that place is nuts. All right, number 19. CIA director says U.S. halted intel sharing with Ukraine following aid pause. New York Post, 5 March 2025. The United States has stopped sharing intelligence with Ukraine following the Trump administration's pause of military aid to the nation, CIA Director John Ratcliffe said Wednesday. Ratcliffe said Trump asked for a pause on both intelligence and military aid because he was skeptical about whether Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was committed to the peace process. Ratcliffe predicted the pause will end in the near future as Zelensky works with the Trump administration to negotiate a peace agreement with Russia. I think if we can nail down these negotiations and, in fact, put some confidence building measures on the table, then the president will take a hard look at lifting this pause, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz said on Wednesday. Number 20. NATO shifts strategy based on lessons learned from Ukraine Air and Space Forces 5 March 2025. NATO is adjusting its military posture and strategy based on lessons learned from the Russian-Ukrainian war. The Assistant Secretary General for Operations said at the AFA Warfare Symposium on Wednesday. Tom Guffis said NATO's Joint Analysis, Training, and Education Center is incorporating lessons from the war to inform the alliance's defense planning. Quote, collective action rests on the foundation of shared awareness, and it takes real work to achieve the shared awareness, Guffis said. We need to rebuild the Ukrainian army when peace breaks out, and then we build it up to deter future aggression. General James Hecker, commander of the U.S. Air Forces in Europe and NATO Allied Air Command, said Ukraine's had success avoiding Russian strikes against its aircraft and noted that NATO has incorporated elements of the Air Force's agile combat employment strategy to protect its own aircraft and airfields. Agile combat employment just means that you're moving from different airfield to different airfield, different location, and there's no, like, you don't always take off out of one location and return to that location. Number 21, Philippine Defense Chief warns allies will fight if China restricts flights over South China Sea. Associated Press, 5 March 2025. The Philippines and its allies will counter any attempt by China to restrict freedom of flights over the South China Sea. Philippine Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro said on Wednesday. Teodoro said he considers China's aggression in the South China Sea the greatest threat to national security and a global threat to trade and global supply chains. Teodoro said any attempt by China to establish an air defense identification zone or exclusion zone would pose a, quote, very serious transgression of international law which demand our response, end quote. China attempted to establish an ADIZ over the East China Sea in 2013, but Japan, the United States, Australia, South Korea, and other allied nations ignored it. Beat it, nerds! 22. GOP chairman brush off call for immediate hearings on firings of top military leaders. Military.com, 5 March 2025. Armed Service Committee Chairman Mike Rogers, Republican from Alabama, said this week he's not interested in holding hearings on the firings of the Joint Chiefs chairman and other top military leaders by the Trump administration last month. Quote, the president's got the prerogative to have the people he wants leading the Pentagon, Rogers said. He's the commander-in-chief. Senator Roger Wicker, Republican from Mississippi, chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, declined to answer whether he'd hold a hearing on the firings. Several previous defense secretaries, most of whom worked for Democratic presidents, called for Congress to investigate the firings in an op-ed last week. Senate Armed Services Committee, the SASC, Democrats called on Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on Monday to justify firing of the service's judge advocate generals, calling the dismissal a direct violation of federal law. No, it's not. It is not. All of these generals, whether they're JAG, the Joint Chiefs, chairman, whatever, right? They serve at the pleasure of the president. And this is not new. Like, this happens with every single administration. So you guys are just upset about it because it's Trump. Got it. 23. Federal judge forces Trump administration to disclose all plans to implement trans military ban. The Advocate, 5 March 2025. A federal judge ordered the Trump administration on Tuesday to immediately disclose any plans to implement its ban on transgender service members from serving in the armed forces. U.S. District Court Judge Benjamin Settle ordered the administration to notify both the court and the plaintiffs in the Schilling versus Trump case before making any changes to the status quo. Defense Department officials have issued at least 9 policy documents since President Donald Trump's inauguration in January, including a Department of the Air Force memorandum issued on March 1st that encourages trans airmen and guardians to voluntarily leave the service. A hearing in another case related to the trans ban, that's how they wrote it, Talbot versus Trump, is scheduled for March 12th. All right, this goes into, I don't know if all these are going to be opinion. Yeah, it looks like the remaining are opinion-based. All right, 24. Opinion. Deny who we are or harm our country. The impossible choice facing transgender service members. Military.com, 5 March 2025. Trans service members must make a difficult choice between harming their country by leaving the service or harming themselves by reverting to standards that don't match their gender identity. Space Force Colonel Bree Fram, of course, writes in an op-ed for military.com, the difference between a person being their authentic self and putting up a facade prevents them from ever being the best they can be at the missions they've been assigned to. Fram writes, it is hiding who we are that damages unit cohesion and capability, not living authentically. Fram provides several examples of trans service members who meet or exceed standards and who are unfairly judged solely by their gender identity, not by their performance, character, or commitment. Fram argues that being trans service members will also harm military recruiting efforts, adding, with nearly 30% of the Gen Z adults aged 18 to 25 identifying as LGBTQ+, can an all-volunteer force afford to alienate so many? Fram argues that trans service members' character will create. Fram argues that the trans service members' character will create an inclusive future that values everyone for their merit and commitment. All right, this person is a grifter. 2 is 30%. Like, you can argue that the LGB isn't a big fan of the TQIA plus side of the house as well. At the same time, like, a lot of this I think is faddish, and I think you have a lot of these folks that are in middle school and high school that are confused, going through a lot of stuff. If you were in middle school, or if you remember correctly, when you were in middle school, it was kind of a confusing time. Like, life was a little bit hard. Things definitely got better in high school. And if you're kind of a loner or want to be part of something, or you're struggling to find an identity, so you could easily latch onto this, and now you're getting attention. That is what this is, in my opinion. But Colonel Bree Fram is a real piece of work, and I would know. 25, opinion. The debate over Elbridge Colby, the Wall Street Journal, 3 March 2025. The confirmation hearings for Elbridge Colby, the Trump administration's nominee for Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, reveal a schism in the GOP between defense hawks and isolationists. The Wall Street Journal's editorial board writes, those editors put Colby close to the latter camp based on his arguments that the United States should withdraw from conflicts in Europe and Southwest Asia to focus on the Indo-Pacific. Quote, his description of the Middle East as a territory region where unnerved supporters of Israel and ditto for suggest my dumbass can't read. Okay. Quote, his description of the Middle East as a territory region has unnerved supporters of Israel, and ditto for suggestions that the U.S. could tolerate a nuclear Iran, the editors write. The board concludes, quote, voters elected Mr. Trump because he promised to restore deterrence against a growing alliance of adversaries. Mr. Colby doesn't hail from the GOP tradition that produced Mr. Trump's first-term success like the Abraham Accords. Senators who scrutinize Mr. Colby's views are doing the president a favor. Fucking whatever, dude. Number 26, and this is the last one. Opinion. China's war plans. Real Clear Defense, 5 March 2025. China's request for hegemony based itself on Chinese President Xi Jinping's insecurity, like no kidding, insecurity, writes Glenn Chavez, former chief of tradecraft and operational technology for the CIA. Quote, insecurity bordering on paranoia drives Xi to ensure the loyalty of the People's Liberation Army, through permanent purges and indoctrination, Chavez writes. Xi has appointed or replaced all of the top leaders of the PLA and has dictated that the PLA units devote between 20 to 40% of their time undergoing political and ideological indoctrination. Xi's coalescing of power means only he can decide whether to invade Taiwan. And as China's economy cools, because they're in a hurt locker, like really, really bad if you're not tracking, Xi has more incentive to take the military action. Chavez concludes, U.S. and allied leaders cannot presume they have an ample time to decide how they will respond and coordinate in the increasingly likely event Xi does resort to military option. I think they will take Taiwan, or at least try to. I don't think there's any doubt about that. It's just a matter of when. We kind of already know how they're going to do it, but it's a matter of when. And the other side of that is, will the U.S. do anything about it? I don't know, but like no kidding on. Obviously, I can't go into detail about it, but I've seen a lot of classified briefs on this, and it is absolutely insecurity and paranoia with President Xi Jinping. Like, it's unbelievable. So anyway, like I said, Barbell Apparel brought you the news today. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed your daily drop of news, and provide feedback. I know that my reading is atrocious. I know that my coughing is annoying. I'm trying to work. I can't do anything about the coughing. I'm trying. But if you want me to recategorize these in some way, but like I said, I'm just reading the news straight from what they send. So, all right, we're out here. Later.